Bueno, muchas gracias a todas las personas que ya se han conectado. Les damos la bienvenida a esta versión de Señales, por fin en el 2022. Esta es una serie de eventos que ya van por su segundo año y nos da mucha felicidad inaugurarlo este año, además con el invitado de lujo que tenemos, que ya les contaremos. Pero queríamos agradecerles a todos por estar acá y por continuar con esta tradición que ya se ha vuelto estos eventos de señales donde tenemos estas discusiones y estos invitados hablando del futuro de la arquitectura, las reflexiones en torno a la arquitectura, a enseñar arquitectura, cómo ha cambiado y cómo se ha modificado. Y creo que son espacios que todos encontramos muy valiosos, entonces nos alegra tenerlo de regreso. Ya voy a cambiar a inglés porque vamos a tener hoy la conferencia es en inglés, tendremos a nuestros invitados. Nuestro invitado va a dar su conferencia en inglés, entonces para las personas que están conectadas que no hablen español, nos vamos a pasar ya para inglés. Entonces, welcome everybody. We are so happy to have you here and to start our new version of Señales this year for 2022. We are delighted to introduce our keynote speaker for tonight. And we're going to have Professor Marc Janet introduce our guest for this version of this event. So, Professor, please.
Bueno, yo voy a hacer la introducción en español para todos los estudiantes y personas que están que nos están acompañando hoy. Como tú lo decías, it's a pleasure, Johnny, to have with us today and tonight for you in Sweden. El profesor, arquitecto y investigador Johnny Åstrand tiene una experiencia de más de 40 años, tanto como profesor, como arquitecto y como investigador. Yo tuve el placer o tengo el placer de conocer a Johnny hace unos cuantos años cuando iniciamos todo el proceso, digamos, de contacto, los primeros contactos que ya dieron fruto en el programa de intercambio que tenemos en la Universidad de los Andes y la Universidad de Lund a través de la beca Linnaeus Palme, que nos va a permitir a partir del semestre entrante hacer el intercambio de dos profesores, tanto suecos como colombianos, y dos profesores y dos estudiantes, tanto suecos como colombianos, que lógicamente los colombianos irán un semestre a Suecia y los suecos vendrán a visitarnos a Bogotá durante un semestre. De hecho, aprovecho para hacer la propaganda que ya la convocatoria está abierta y que ojalá pues tengamos una masiva inscripción para tener la mayor cantidad de...
Ya enviamos en el chat, en este momento, aprovechando la cuña del profesor Marc, vamos a enviar el link de la convocatoria para que lo tengan ahí en el chat.
Sí, bueno, yo creo que todos debieron ver la hoja de vida del profesor Åstrand. Yo quisiera destacar del profesor Åstrand de las veces que nos hemos reunido en él y también tuve el gran placer de estar una semana invitado allí con la profesora Carolina Blanco en Lund. Y allí pues vimos de primera mano todo el magnífico y maravilloso trabajo que hace el HDM o el Housing Development Management, que ha venido dirigiendo Johnny durante más de, creo que son 30 años, algo así. Es una gran cantidad de tiempo. Enumerar todos los países que Johnny ha visitado y donde ha trabajado sería interminable, pero bueno, algunos cercanos, él ha estado en Ecuador, lógicamente también tuvimos el placer de tenerlo justo hace 2 años, antes de que empezara la pandemia, nos visitó con nuestra exalumna y hoy en día que trabaja también en el HDM, que es María Rasmussen. Lo tuvimos en la Universidad de los Andes, también en contraprestación a nuestra visita Lund. Y bueno, Johnny ha trabajado en Ecuador, en Bolivia, en Centroamérica, en África. Yo creo que el pasaporte de él debe tener ya varios pasaportes, porque deben estar llenos de sellos y debe ser un enorme lujo tenerlo como parte de una colección, todos los pasaportes llenos de sellos y de países que ha visitado. Yo lo que puedo decir del profesor Åstrand es que, no sé, me parece que si alguien sabe de temas de lo que en inglés se llama el housing, o lo que aquí creo que mal llamamos la vivienda social, es claramente él. Su experiencia no solo como arquitecto, como investigador, como profesor que ha dirigido tesis de maestría y doctorado, y en especial todo ese maravilloso, intenso trabajo que hacen a través del HDM, pues nos permite hoy pues tener una persona, yo creo que top total, top mundial a nivel de lo que tiene que ver con los temas de la vivienda. Yo quisiera por último destacar el curso de Urban Shelter que Johnny dictó hasta creo que hasta el 2020 o 2022, un curso que tuvimos la oportunidad de ver en funcionamiento allí en Suecia, y pues claramente hoy es un gran privilegio escucharlo. Ojalá que todos nuestros visitantes y los que están atendiendo la charla pues la aprovechen. Ojalá al final haya una buena cantidad de preguntas. Por último, ojalá que Johnny nos vuelva a visitar. Me acuerdo que hace 2 años cuando estuve en Bogotá, yo estoy aquí sentado en la mesa de mi comedor, y aquí estuvimos con Johnny una noche, y con Carolina y María departiendo, y le brindamos un ajiaco que todavía siempre Johnny se acuerda de soup. Pues welcome again, Johnny, to your home, to Colombia, to the University of Los Andes. We are glad and proudly to have you with us once again, and thanks for your kindness, and welcome. The word is all yours. Thank you very thank you.
Thank you very much, Mark, for this very kind words. Also thank you to Señales for this invitation. I've had opportunity to visit Bogota once, so of course I would also very much like to come back and one day, as Mark says. And as Mark also mentioned, I have traveled quite a lot, and in fact I was in the Philippines with 23 students when the pandemic developed in 2020 in March, and we had to go home, and we closed the university and so. And I figured out then that I haven't been so long in Sweden since 1974, because I normally travel 3 months a year, but of course the pandemic changed a lot. Can you change so I can share my slide again, or can I do it again myself?
Yes, you can do it. You have the permission now, so you can press share screen.
Okay.
There we go.
You can? Okay.
Yes, now we're seeing your screen. Perfect.
Yeah. So, and please let me know if the sound is not good.
So far, so good.
Thank you. How can architects contribute to sustainable housing for future generation? That is the topic that I like to think about a lot and have been working with. And I have worked about 35 years, both as a practicing architect, but also teaching, as Mark mentioned, in Africa, Asia, Latin America, and Sweden. I've also been able to follow all UN conference, the Habitat Conference and the World Urban Forums since way back 1996 now, to keep track now. And we have actually had students and professionals from 103 countries in our courses in Lund. This will be my structure of this presentation. Briefly about my background. When I graduated as an architect from Lund University in 1981, we were some students and teachers. We founded an NGO, non-governmental ONG, Swedish Association for Low-Cost Housing, and I will come back to what we did in Tunisia. And then later, 1988, I joined the university and have been directing housing development and management at Lund University since then. I will brief you a little on my experience from Tunisia, where I learned a lot about the importance of livelihood, the connection between livelihood and housing, importance of climate, and also culture. Costa Rica, traveled for the first time 1989, and there I learned about community needs and institutional development. We will come back to that now. Mid-90s, started to work also in Peru and Bolivia. And from my colleagues in Peru, I've learned a lot about the impact of governance and policy and housing. And it was not always a good impact now. I will focus on the Philippines. As Mark mentioned, we have the course on urban shelter. So we have traveled with many students to the Philippines, and there we have learned about the role of public and private actors now. And then we will wrap up a little about Sweden, how research and development have contributed to sustainability now. If we start with housing development and management, you can find more on the website there. As other university departments, we do undergraduate education for students, and this course we have been running for 10 years or a little bit more, urban shelter. We traveled with the students to the Philippines so they could learn from that reality. So these were main European students mainly that attended this course. Then for many years we have had postgraduate education that was funded by the Swedish government so that professionals from Africa, Asia, and Latin America could attend courses on these topics in Sweden. And if I'm not wrong, I recognize one of my old students, now a professor, Eric Vergel. Now he was in one of the master course. And then for a period from 95 to 2010, we were implementing a capacity development program. Sorry for the misspelling there. Promesa Program para la Capacitación del Mejoramiento Sociohabitacional. We didn't do that alone. We had counterparts in many countries, but 6,000 professionals, 6,500 were trained in that program. And then research and PhD studies, as also Mark mentioned, and of course, publications. You find more on the website. And I just want to mention the Promesa program that was funded by Swedish government and the World Bank. We had a menu of different activities, and the purpose of this program was to improve conditions, especially for the low-income families in urban areas, improve living and housing conditions now. So we needed to have dialogues not only among professionals, but also with the decision makers and ministers and mayors and so. And the countries that we covered were these eight countries now. Our publications you also find in PDF format. This is one of the latest PhD theses. As an architect, Lisandra Facinello from Brazil, she looked on the impact of green roofs. When I talk about sustainable development, I often go back to what the Brundtland Commission wrote in their report 1987, Our Common Future. And they defined sustainable development, as you probably know, to development that meets the needs of the present without compromising the ability of future generations to meet their own needs. Environmental protection, economic growth, and social equity. And we architects are not always good to think of all the three. Sometimes we think only on the environment. That's important, but it's not enough. The situation is that at least 2 billion more people will require housing in urban and rural areas in 2030, and that's relatively soon now. 130 million more people reside in urban slums than in 1995. We have improved quite a lot of the slum worldwide, but still more people are living there. So every country will need more options for affordable, adequate, and safe housing. Why is the population growing in cities? Well, sometimes we think that it's because so many are moving to the cities, but the fact is that in the cities in developing countries, the major part is natural growth. Children that are born in the city correspond to 50–60% of the population growth, whereas migrants maybe is maximum 30%, and change of borders are 10% now. This is under normal conditions, not in natural disasters and so. My first experience was in Tunisia, and this is a cover of a book we wrote after that experience, Une solution du problème de l'habitat en région rurale. So this was a rural project, and on the picture you see a lady with her children, and this lady was building or improving their house together with her husband. The reason I worked in Tunisia was that we were a group of young architects. We got in contact with a local organization, NGO, for rural development, and they wanted help to improve housing conditions in the rural area. SDR already helped people there to educate them and to get better revenue from their agriculture, and also modernizing their methods, not introducing tractors that would be too advanced, but having a metal plow instead of a wooden one, and also how to manage their economy. And this gave results. So they were able to have much better crops, bigger, and also more variation. And then they could sell their products. And the people said to us, we are worried because our housing is so bad, so our children will move to the city if we cannot improve it. And how was the housing? Well, this is a sketch we did way back in 1979, actually, February 25. There was one simple house called Gurbi, and there's one room here for living and cooking and everything. So this was the room for the family, and 8 persons were sleeping on this bed, and here we had the stable and a courtyard. And it's a very low building, and problems, and the floor was also low, so problem with flooding when it's raining. This is a little bit better than with what we saw there. This is a house of stone, natural stone in the area. And this is what the government offered as social housing. They built these groups of houses. This building here is actually 4 apartments, we can say. One here, and 2 on the back side. So that means that they are oriented in different directions. So the indoor comfort, thermal comfort is not very good. And they are far away from the agricultural land. And that is the reason that nobody wanted to live there, even if they got it for free. So I learned for the first time here in Tunisia that the house is never cheap when it's empty, even if we can build it cheap. Now, there were thousands left like this. We tried to understand the situation by learning, and this is way back in 1979. We had no laptops at that time, no cell phone, no internet communication. So we manually went around and made inventory of how people were solving their housing by themselves now. This is a simple sketch from them, and we could see that the rooms are rectangular. There's often a courtyard, and communication is never between the rooms, but over the courtyard. So this was a cultural way of solving housing, you can say. This indicates the north. And when we traveled to Tunisia the first time, we had never been to Africa at all, and we were also informed that this is a Muslim country, you know, and it's very important to know the direction of Mecca. So we thought all the buildings were oriented towards Mecca. That was absolutely wrong. It had nothing to do with Mecca. It had everything to do with the climate. Here is the Gourbi. As you can see, a not so permanent building of soil and branches, and that needs a lot of maintenance. So 1/3 of the population live like this. We needed to understand, how do you spend your daily life? This is a oven where you bake your bread every other day. We needed to understand a little about family relations. Family could be 5-6 persons, but often you would live several generations together. So this here is more than one family. We were told before that you can absolutely not talk to women because this is also a Muslim country, so don't try that. And this was absolutely no problem. We were let in to the families because these were rural settings, so it was different. And we enjoyed many cups of tea with the local people here. When I traveled to Tunisia 1 year in February for the first time, I think that would be nice to go to Africa because February is quite cold in Sweden. But I have to admit that I have never been freezing so much in my whole life as I have been doing in Africa, different parts now. Here is the temperature, and the minimum temperature in February goes down even below 0. And it goes up in July. So then the minimum is July is maybe around 15, and the maximum is of course close to 40. And we learned very fast that you can manage in the high temperature, but this cold temperature is very difficult when you have no indoor heating. In Sweden we have heating, but here was no heating. And making drawings in our room where we had 7 degrees was no fun. So we understood that you have to think about climate when you design. This is the rainfall, by the way. So how could we help these people and help SDR to come up with a proposal how they could improve their housing situation? We formulated some goals, and we said we should design dwellings of a minimum standard which entails improvised climatic shelter to be more comfortable, better hygienic conditions, there were no toilets, and less cramped living. Some of them had only 2 square meters per person housing area. We should design dwellings adapted to the existing living pattern, not as the one the government provided. We should build solid dwellings with a life expectancy of at least 25 years. And build dwellings which result in a living cost which can be met by the poorest families' financial means. So these were our goals. How could we achieve this? After this careful inventory for months and discussion with SDR, our hosting organization, we said, how can we achieve something like this? Well, we figured out that people have to contribute. It has to be self-help housing, but organized self-help housing. They needed technical advice and support and so on. We have to develop appropriate building methods and organize the project so that you can coordinate the purchase and transport of materials and equipment, make it cheaper, organize the families in building teams, and optimize the use of local materials in relation to non-local, taking into account the labor input, quality, and cost. So with these ideas and sketches, I went together with the director of SDR to the Minister of Housing in Tunisia and said, we are willing to help here. You only need to help fund projects so that families can get loans. And the minister, he was very polite, but he was also very clear that this was nothing for Tunisia. Tunisia has much bigger visions, so self-help housing is not interesting. Maybe you can do that in Sweden. And people are lazy in the rural areas, and they will not participate. So of course, we were very disappointed. We were not kicked out of the minister's office, but we felt like we were kicked out. So when we went out, I talked to my Tunisian friend, and I said, so that's it. Now we go to the Swedish embassy and see if they can give us some seed funding to start. And then we finance the new houses in accordance with the official Tunisian housing finance system. So we were lucky to get some starting finance from the Swedish government. And this project started. Here we see self-builders doing the walls to the new house. You see these thick walls, it's a lot of work. We tried to develop some appropriate roofing methods with the local building materials. And they manufactured here a cement stabilized block for the roof and other parts. If I'm not mistaken, so I think this Sinwaram is from Colombia originally. Here are self-builder, his son, and an instructor making the blocks. And here they're then making a new roof, beams that we designed special beams that they could manufacture themselves and then put the blocks. So here they make a roof on an old house. And here we see an improved rural dwelling. So the new roof on the existing house. And here is a kitchen, and we don't see there is a small toilet here also. And people were happy. They got windows for the first time, some daylight into the room. They had small kitchens, and they improved the hygiene and the way of cooking also, from charcoal to kerosene to gas. This became this project that was a pilot project was discovered by the next Minister of Housing when he was inaugurating schools in this region. And he went here and saw that this was much better than the government was doing. So he went out in TV and said, no, housing policy in favor of self-help housing, autoconstruction. And this time the Swedish embassy called me and said, Johnny, have you heard anything about this? No idea, said, but and one thing is for sure, the minister doesn't understand anything about self-help housing. He just have seen that it has been successful. So I think now we need to see if we can find a way to educate the minister and his staff, and help them out in a way. And we were asked by the minister to organize seminars. And here we have organized the first seminar in 1987. Here's the minister himself. It was not the one that kicked me out. This one became a friend, so we changed. You can see also that the policymakers here at this time in Tunisia were not so many women. But anyhow, they changed the policy for the better. What was the reason why this project was a success and the one that the government has been working with so long was a failure? I think one key aspect was the connection to livelihood. This is a very simple sketch showing that this is agricultural land for the farmers, and these are the residential buildings. So they need to live near their land. They couldn't be regrouped at another place like the government did before now. Another aspect was that even if the family had a very bad house, you see that as a resource that can be transformed to a stable, and then they build their new house beside it now. And as you can see here, the old house becomes a stable, and this is their new house. His mother and father and seven children. They used to have in the old house 3.5 square meter per person, which is not a lot. In the new house, they have 7.2, so they double now. The total cost is 1,176 Tunisian dinars, which correspond to American dollar, and they have to pay then with this finance model $4.2 per month to pay back the loan. So how can it be so cheap? Well, that's because they worked 1 year to build their own house. They both father and mother and also children. So this was way back in the 1980s. We started this in 1979, and maybe you remember that one of our goals was that the dwelling should last at least 25 years. And I had the opportunity to go back. I worked some years in Tunisia at that time, but I had the opportunity to go back 2009. So that was exactly 30 years ago, 30 years after the first house, the first houses were built now. And then I wanted to meet with his family. This is Belgassem and his family. He was an instructor for us and a self-builder. And I gave him this book that I showed you before. And here on the cover is a picture of his wife standing here and their children. And now they are standing here as grandparents with their grandchildren. And I was, of course, a little bit nervous for this roof that we have designed. How is it, Belgassem? Is the roof still okay? And he said, Johnny, step inside and I will show you. And in French, they say impeccable. So you see no traces of humidity. So I was very happy. And then he said, let's go and meet with Mohammed, the other instructor. So I said, is he still alive? He was very old. No, he was not that old. He was only 40 years when you were here. Now he is in his 60s. And that was a nice meeting. So I asked Mohammed, so what have you been doing since we worked with this in the 80s? And then he said, Johnny, can you not remember anything? What do you mean, Mohammed? You gave me these documents. This is what you develop instructions for how we should do. In this case, it's a roof beam. And I'm now a contractor. I have been doing this for the last 25 years now. So that was, for me, an opportunity to learn about when people are given the opportunity to improve their housing conditions or their condition, they are very motivated. So we could clearly see that here was a social and economic development. We had contributed to gender awareness, increased housing affordability, and also improved quality of life for the families. The next country I traveled to was actually Nicaragua in the end of the 80s and Costa Rica. And I just would like to show with you very briefly the experience of FUPROVI, Fundación Promotora de Vivienda. They started their activity way back in 1987 to improve housing in urban areas. And as you can see, quite simple row houses. This is in San Jose. But the strength of FUPROVI has been to work with the communities. So they normally say they don't build houses, only they build communities now, and they train them now. This is the way they built the first houses in the line of the 1980s. Families would contribute to the work, and they would do the finishing. They would do like sealing here by themselves. And FUPROVI has developed over time. So this picture is from a couple of years ago when I was in Costa Rica latest time. And now they talk about not only about self-help building, but also self-management. And the women you see here, they are the future residents in this area. They don't build everything because there is professional contractor involved, but they manage the site and they improve the outdoor environment. And this is how the result will be. And these are low-income people. And FUPROVI is continuing in that same way. And what is also impressing is that the way they started with seed capital from the Swedish government, and that has been a rotating fund that has helped them to work for so many years. Now we go to Lima. Probably several of you have been here. This is in Miraflores. You know that Lima is a city with 13 municipalities, if I remember correctly. And we have worked with DESCO, a big non-governmental organization, and they have an urban division. And we tried to persuade another minister, the vice minister of housing in Peru, to give some, how can I say, attention to technical assistance. This is in the south of Lima, where people have got their site and service. All the sites are 5 meters wide by 21 meters long, back to back. That was a cheap way of solving the housing for the government many years ago. But of course, people are densifying, and when the families grow or they want to have a business, so they do vertical expansion. And the problem with this is that it's not earthquake proof. So the next earthquake, this will all collapse. And there's not also very good daylight in these houses. So we proposed for the minister to have a program for technical assistance so that young architects could work with the families when they do this kind of. But again, the minister was not very interested in this and said, no, we'd rather build new houses, even though that costs more, but it gives also, I think, more attention in media when you inaugurate new housing areas. And Villa El Salvador, that you're probably familiar with, I think there are at least 200,000 plots of the same size. So that is a mistake not to repeat, to do so many plots of the same size. So you have the same. And people are now squeezed here. We have the sea here and we have the mountain. So they've used a lot of land for this. And what can young families do today? Well, they go and buy a small wooden hut like this, and they bring it up in the ravines of Lima because they can do that. Nobody will stop them. And there is a law in Peru that you can get legal title if you are on this kind of land that is not owned by anybody. And the intention with this law is that when you have your legal title, you can also have a loan and you can have access to infrastructure. So people believe on this. 150,000 people at least live in the ravines. But when they go to the bank and ask for a loan, of course, the bank will ask, what is the value of your property? And this, well, this is not worth anything. And what's your regular income? Well, I work in the informal sector, but you don't get any loan. What is worse, they will also not get any water connection because it's too far away and too expensive. So they have to buy the water from tanks like this, and it costs them about 4 times as much per cubic meter as for the tap water in the city. This program of technical assistance, however, another minister was more open to that. Luckily, the ministers change now and then. So DESCO has quite successfully been running a program with technical assistance for people in Villa El Salvador for some years now. Here now we go to Metro Manila, a city of at least 15 million inhabitants. Excuse me, it's actually 17 municipalities and 17 mayors that agree. And here you can see, this is what we call one of the cities, Makati, which is often called also the business district. And here you can see the other parts of the city where you have big informal settlements. And if we look carefully here, these are the central parts of Metro Manila. We see areas where there are big informal settlements, or not at least here on the harbor area. It's a city of contrast. This is formal shopping mall at Christmas time when I was there. So some people go here and shopping. In the informal settlements, the shops look like this. Here I'm trying to buy some card for my cell phone now. So there are the contrasts that we know. The National Housing Authority of the Philippines is responsible to provide housing for 30% of the population and 30% of the poorest part of the population now. This is their website, and I have worked with them more than 15 years. And we have also had their staff in our courses. They have different activities on housing. They work with upgrading. Here is, you can see, one informal settlement that is being upgraded. It has been informal for 30 years, I remember correctly. And what happens is that National Housing Authority will contract architects that work with the communities to agree on how the area should be replanned, if you can say. So you change as little as possible of the streets, but you have to change some streets so you can have access to emergency cars and so. And then when the people have agreed on a map like that, that's when you start the work. And the first thing is that they have to knock down some of the buildings, and people actually do that because they know that they will not be evicted when they are legalized now, and they manufacture their own building materials, and they build up often of higher quality. And here we can see a family that has been able to invest quite a lot. Here I'm with a group of students in informal settlements now. So this is a house that will cost maybe 20,000 US or so today. So when they are legalized, people find possibilities to improve and invest now. However, architects that work with this need to have other skills than just new development. You need to be able to negotiate and to find how do you transform an informal settlement to a formal settlement. There are different kinds of challenges, not only technical challenges. What happens in Metro Manila is that when the rumor is around that this will be legalized, suddenly there will be people coming here and pretending that they have lived here for a long time, because then they will benefit from this legalization. And then one day when I was in this area, the local architect said, "Johnny, I will not go around with you because I have evicted some people that don't belong here, and they are very mad at me and they might kill me. So you have to go on your own, and that's no problem because they don't know me." So there are different kinds of challenges when you work with this kind of project, but this can be the end result. Quite normal human settlement with service and infrastructure. The National Housing Authority also do new development. They have a program for medium-rise building. Here we see a plan, and as you can see, the apartments are relatively small, 22.5 square meter and 24, and these are apartments for up to 5 persons now. So it's relatively dense, and this is one site, and this is how it looks. So many families, many people living on a relatively small area, but it's solid and it's safe. And this is how interior can look: a small kitchen, small balcony, but very well organized. And the National Housing Authority has in the latest year, because they have discovered a problem with maintenance of these buildings. So now they have started to train people when they move in. If they move from informal settlements, they never had a bathroom or so. So now they start to train people when they move in how to organize themselves and how to use different things, and that has improved sustainability quite a lot now. Also talking about waste management. We move on to non-governmental organizations. In the Philippines, of course, the governmental organizations are doing the bulk of the project, but the non-governmental organizations are very important. I will show projects that Tau Pilipinas, that is a small organization of women, most of them architects working with the urban poor. Habitat for Humanity, that's a branch from Habitat for Humanity International, but they have one in the Philippines. And Gawad Kalinga is a Filipino religious-based non-governmental organization. This is the harbor area. And what you see here is informal settlements. And why have they settled down here? Well, of course, because they have livelihood here, they can work in the harbor. So here are, I don't know, maybe 6,000 to 7,000 people at least living here in the harbor. Of course, it's illegal, but they are not evicted because they are accepted by the local government. What has happened here? Here are new row houses. We can see from, if we go to Google Earth, for example. What happened here was there was a fight in the family, and the woman was not to throw a kerosene lamp on him, but she missed him and hit the wall of their house. And this is areas called Baseca. This was in 2004. I was actually there just after, and many houses burnt down, all of this area. And nobody was killed, but they lost their homes now. And the local government of Manila didn't really have the resources to do something. So the NGOs were the ones helping people. No? And this is the environment where the children was playing after this, because the NGOs, they helped to build new houses. This is Habitat for Humanity, so quite nice 2-story row houses, but they didn't really have the resources to do something about the outdoor environment. And here the children are guarding their house. They have put their shoes here before they go in, so they keep it very clean. And these NGOs operate as many different ways to fund their projects. So when Bosch was willing to give them some tools, they will also get a nice picture here to show where the tools come from. So lots of this kind of fundraising. Habitat for Humanity the Philippines has developed a, can we say, building technology that works quite well for self-help housing. These are blocks, interlocking blocks that they have developed, and where you also can easily do reinforcement and installation of water and electricity. And that's used quite a lot. And here, Tau Pilipinas that I mentioned have helped former slum dwellers in a very tough area to improve their housing. And as you can see, it's quite green. And here are actually living 3,000 persons per hectare. So it's a relatively high population density, but now a very safe area and a good environment. Doesn't follow the bill. It's legal, but it doesn't really follow the building code when it comes to access to cars and so. But people don't mind. They have a good thermal comfort and they have safe homes here. And this is an area I have visited many years times with students for our students to understand the visions of the people here and how they would like their housing. So as you can probably see, here's a student from China, here's one from Finland, I remember, and from Sweden. And this first time in their life, they see something like this, and they're sitting down and talking to a slum dweller and understand the reason. We are always very well received when we go to the informal settlements. There is, of course, a lot of stigma. From not at least for the local population. Sometimes the bus driver didn't want to do that. And when I say I have friends in this area, so I will show you, I would tell the driver, I will show you how this area is that he doesn't dare to go into. That's how it can be in Metro Manila. And then the students go back to Lund and they try to transform their ideas, their impressions into design that they think can be affordable and suitable for these people now. We're running soon, wrapping up here, but we will have a look on Sweden. and how housing has developed in Sweden. This is a picture. This is about 100 years ago, when Sweden was a predominantly rural country, and people lived like this. We can say 1870. 80% of the population lived like this, and 20% lived in urban areas. And Sweden had 100 years up to 1970 to urbanize, become a country where 80% live in urban areas. So we had a very long time to transform. And this is a picture of Stockholm, our biggest city now. But that was a transformation that meant that we improved the living standard. If you see my mouse here, this is one apartment for industrial workers that we built up to 1930. Here is a kitchen. Here is a room, multifunctional, and here's another multifunctional. There's no toilet, no bathroom. This was the standard we built in Sweden up to 1930s. It was very low standard, and often families would sublet. So you had one family, maybe 5 persons here and another there, and toilets would be on the courtyard, outdoors. 1930s, we started to have research in Sweden about design of apartments and to have building codes and regulation. And you see, if you look on this apartment, now it's different. Here is a bathroom. Here is a living room that is at least 20 square meter. Here is a bedroom, at least 10 square meter, and here is a kitchen. So we got codes in the 1930s as a reaction to the bad situation we have now. And we started to build in a different way, not in the very dense courtyard. This is in Stockholm, built 1930s. Today, a quite attractive area. And as you can see, probably inspired also by Corbusier. This is a later example that is considered maybe one of the Swedish flagships at a later time. It was designed by Jan Inge Hagström. I had the opportunity to follow this. It's central, located in Stockholm, a much more integrated approach than our large-scale housing areas. Residential, service, and commercial, Hammarby, Åstrand. And this is how it looks there. Often you have commercial in the ground floor and the residential on the top, and you have a mix of different forms of tenure. Color scheme is quite typical for Stockholm. And I wanted to share with you also the latest innovation when it comes to urban design and housing in Sweden. I think that we can find in Vallastaden, where there was a Swedish National Housing Exhibition 2017. Here I visited it with some of my colleagues. It's not a very big settlement, but it's an extension of a city. And the city decided to have an architectural competition first for the process. How should the area be developed? And the one company that won it said we should have key principles. The allotments, the plots should be for diversity, different sizes. It should be tightness, so we have urban life. There should be possibilities to meet in everyday life. There should be parks for identity and well-being, walking and cycling perspectives, fixed land prices, different categories for rental, cooperative, and individual private housing. But the most important, the bidding process for the companies that want to build there should focus on quality, not on price. This was unique in Sweden, and this is how the area looked. You can see very diversified as a reaction to what we have seen in other large-scale housing programs. Just show the map very differently, so there are different qualities in the different buildings. This is student housing, and this has got some prices for a good design. You cannot see so much about it, but there are big common areas, and this is a studio where the students live, and with a small loft for sleeping now. Some facts on housing in Sweden. Municipalities are responsible for land use and also for housing in Sweden. But of course, most housing is private. And we have mixed forms of tenure are common in every area: ownership, cooperative, and rental housing. Public-private partnership for everything almost. We have about 480 dwellings for 1,000 inhabitants. Average housing area per person is 44 square meters. And we need another 700,000 units to have a housing shortage. And that will increase now with the refugees from Ukraine, unfortunately. I would say that some of the current challenges is to make housing affordable for young families. It's very expensive to buy your first apartment or house, and rent can be difficult in big cities. To have more adequate housing for elderly, often old people would maybe like to leave a big house and move into something else. We have an issue of social segregation, and it has increased with the refugees we got from Syria and other places. We have not been able to solve that well. We have a high cost of housing, and then of course energy consumption for heating. So what do architects need to understand and be capable of in order to contribute to sustainable housing for future generations? This was supposed to be the lesson from this lecture now. And at first, when preparing, I was thinking I should do a long list here that architects needs to understand: housing policy, the housing sector, the housing market, housing finance, but they also need to do understand about environmental impact, building technology, how to transform people's ideas and visions to design. But I didn't do that list because I think that's the list you can do. Everyone listening now, you can do your own list and think, what do you need? What are the challenges for the future? And it is a big, very big challenge to do sustainable housing for future generations. So is it really utopia, or is it possible? Well, I would say it's impossible. I was very happy when I 2019 was brought to this area, La Fragua, that probably you know much better than me, that Herman Samper and his wife Yolanda Samper designed way back in 1958. Actually, Yolanda explained that it was a driver they had that had nowhere to live, and they tried to help Herman Samper and his wife. Now, I had the opportunity to meet Herman Samper also in the Biennale of Quito, but unfortunately he was not with us when I visited here now. And I was very impressed by this area with small resources, but because the design, the urban design, was very well thought of. 1958, imagine now, the scale here, the public spaces, the small streets between the houses, no need to have big streets for car. The idea to first build a small house where you could move in while you build your big house, the bigger, well, it's not big, but the bigger house to self-help now. And this is the site plan that he did now. And of course, when you have to care for the details now when you have compact living, and these are some sketches to show how can you arrange the indoor spaces now. And this is how it looked in 2019. Here we see one of the original houses. Here's another, but how people have densified now. Here is a very happy owner, 94 years old, showing us. And here we have also Elena Samper, the daughter, that brought me to this area, was very kind. And he was, of course, very proud or could tell the stories from since 1958 now. So I think this shows that good architects can make a big difference now. So we have something to learn from examples like this. Thank you very much.
Yoni, thank you very much for your presentation. You move us around different places, and right now I would like to welcome questions. If there are questions in the audience, like pueden preguntar en español o en inglés y las traducimos. Como que acá entre mis notas tengo muchas, pero pues vivienda cooperativa, el tema de renta, vivienda. Y acá tenemos una de Christian. What made you get started in affordable housing?
Okay. Nobody has asked that question before. But you know, I'm probably the same age as Mark, or a little bit older now. So I grew up in the early 1960s. Now I'm born 55, and I lived with my parents. It was very comfortable, but at that time when you was looking for new place in Sweden, we talked about modern and half modern apartments. No, and modern would mean that you have central heating and you have hot water and you have a bathroom. No. We didn't have that. We had no central heating, so we had to fire in an apartment. That was quite common both in Sweden and in Copenhagen. But what made an impact when we visited my grandmother, and she had to bring water with a bucket, carry water now. So I said, this cannot be, and I remember we put a pump to her. So I had an interest there. But then as an architectural student, we were a group that was curious to travel. So first we traveled to the Netherlands, to UK, and to France. And then we said, no, we really would like to understand how it is in a developing country. And that's how we ended up in Tunisia. And then when we saw the housing conditions there, but we also saw the impact of this pilot project, I think that's how I got stuck in this field. So it was some, can we say, personal background, but also circumstances. And that was my thesis work in Tunisia. And not so many are happy, I can say, fortunate that your thesis becomes a project that is built, and then it becomes also a change of policy. So that had an impact, I think.
All right. Any other question? Well, some others ask in like a compliment to that question, something extra about that question and that answer is, I was wondering whether you had some kind of training before arriving to Tunisia on how to approach like communities, because it surprised me that the approach is not maybe a common mistake that I have the solution, I'm gonna do, how can you live like that, but actually looking, observing a lot.
Well, the training we have in Sweden for architects we used to have is quite practical now. So it's not so artistic, you can say. It's more technical and social now. So we had actually, for example, made interviews in Sweden of households and so we had some ideas of that now. But then I think in Tunisia we were lucky because and of course we had to learn French. I mean, I didn't know any French before, but I had to learn French because that was easier than Arabic. We were lucky to end up with a good Tunisian organization that was very open-minded now. And also actually, in fact, there was, with that organization was working a French Catholic monk. And I must admit, I had never met a monk before. And I was very skeptic to everything with religion now. But this monk, he changed my head now. And not at least he learned me to appreciate good French wine. So I learned many things from him. So we were lucky that we had a good contact and a good network now, and a kind of practical education with us.
And from the 1980s ideas, we jump to Eric's question about the very contemporary one. Could you please let us know your thoughts about the challenges and opportunities for affordable housing that you see in the light of the pandemic of COVID-19?
Okay. Well, if I look on Sweden first now, so what happened during the pandemic is that those of us that have a kind of office job, we have worked a lot from home now. And I think many are going to continue to do that. For example, architect office in Sweden now, they are considering that they don't need working places for all staff. Maybe it's enough to have for 70% because you don't need to be in the office the whole time. So they are actually reducing their office space. But it also means that if you work from home, you need the facilities, no? And not everybody have that. Our neighbors, for example, I'm sitting in the basement of our house. It's an old Bauhaus, and we are only 2 persons. And my wife, she's on the top floor. Of course, it's a gender issue. She has a better view. So we have, but our neighbors, they have 3 small children now, and the father in the family, he has no place where he can sit and work undisturbed now. And I have had Zoom meetings with colleagues that sit in a wardrobe now. So I think there will be some rethinking of both workplaces and people are now also in Sweden looking more for slightly bigger houses in more rural areas. And giving up their apartments in inner city areas. So there are different shifts now. Now, if we move to Metro Manila, that I know well, and I have kept in contact during the whole pandemic, there the challenge is really difficult because, I mean, the informal settlements, if they don't work, they don't have any income. And if they don't have any income, they don't have any food. So that's a much tougher conditions now.
Okay. And here I'm glad Daniel is asking about self-construction, like self-help housing, what we call the autoconstrucción, right? In relation to sustainability, because I think in Colombia there is a kind of distance with self-construction, and here in specific, Daniel asked us, can autoconstruction or autoconstruction methods be combined with more industrialized techniques of construction, or are these 2 approaches of conflicting, are both conflicting?
Okay. Well, I would say that if we look here in the Nordic countries, there are some examples in Denmark, actually, where they have applied self-help housing, autoconstruction, in a more industrialized way, but in the way that these are multi-story buildings where you don't build the whole building, but you have the option to buy your apartment only, how can I say, with no interior walls and no finishing now. There's just kitchen and bathroom, and then you do the all finishing. And people have preferred to. I visited some of this area and interviewed people there, and then I asked them why do you prefer to do all this by themselves? And they say because we can afford more, because by buying a raw unit, if you say so. We can reduce the cost with 200,000 to 300,000 krona. That's 20,000 to 30,000 US$. And we have some friends. One is a carpenter, another is a painter, so we can do that ourselves. These projects are rare because these projects are not normally something that contractor would like to do because they will have less income, less profit now. There's some architect office that have initiated projects like that. So I think what limits different kinds of innovation is often it can be the financial system, but it can also be resistance from the sector now. You want to do what you have used to do.
Right. And there are a lot of questions. I hear one more from David. I think it's another myth, this situation of profit and quality, and how on these informal settlements or in certain areas it's difficult to construct. So specifically, he said, can you explain more about building process with focus on quality? In Bogota, we have more than 1/5 of our land builded with informal settlements, and it is difficult for private sector to invest and receive income from renewal or cooperative projects to improve these areas.
Okay, there are many views on that, but if I go back to the experience from Tunisia, and if you remember the picture I showed, the governmental buildings that were built by private contractors but were empty because people, they were not at all adapted to local conditions now. But there was a lot of corruption, of course. I mean, not of course, but there was a lot of corruption among the contractors now, so to get the contracts and so. But when people started to build self, and it became a policy in Tunisia, I mean, they are very much aware of the funds, and they will make sure that if they pay for 5 bags of cement, they will get 5 bags of cement, and so in that sense, corruption reduced a lot in Tunisia now. Now, I'm not so familiar with the situation in Bogota now, but what I have seen, and also in Costa Rica, actually, where Fuprovi have developed self-help housing, is that the quality has improved, also the technical quality, not because people are skilled, but they're more concerned. I mean, you will not make any failures with your own house or so. I don't know if that was a response to the question.
I think corruption reduction, yes, and of course involving the people in order for them to be responsible with the materials and so on, yes, but there is also this idea that you cannot be profitable when you get into these areas. Well, I think the model should be revised. It's profitable, but maybe not in large amounts, probably.
Okay. I also have to think, I think we also have to realize there is not one method or one solution. You should use a palette of solutions for different target groups and different areas and so on. But if I look on the development of the market in the Philippines, that I know fairly well and have followed for more than 15 years, we can see that there the contractors, they are targeting lower income groups now. I mean, 15 years ago, they would only target very high income groups because they would make more money there. But then they have understood in the Philippines that here is also a market from middle income groups. So then they have made smaller units, maybe 30 to 40 square meters. And now even the company Ayala Land that used to target only very luxury, they are doing smaller units of 20 to 30 square meters. So it's more affordable now. So I think it depends how sensitive the market is. That has also been combined because they have had a housing finance system in the Philippines that would give, how can you say, softer conditions for a small apartment so that people can access now. And then the contractors have how can I say, could use this finance model and people could access it. Of course, some have also discovered that if you can make it bigger, you can sell one unit to the husband and one to the wife, and you can get two subsidies and so. But I think it's related both to the regulatory system, both permits and finance, but also how the market, the contractors react and the competition between them.
Okay, that will be on the system. And here another question from Daniel is about traditional ways of constructing that sometimes are difficult to change or to introduce new systems. So did you ever have some frictions with the communities when connected these two visions of traditional versus new methodologies?
Yes, and I think that's a very important question. For example, in Tunisia, when we worked there and we lived, I mean, in the rural area, so we got to know people relatively well. And when we presented our design, I remember we had one idea because they had very little furniture, so and the walls were quite thick, 50 centimeters. So we said we can integrate so you have shelves there. and people, so we make a drawing, we try to show it, we made model, and they said no, they didn't like it. No, they have never seen that. They've never seen that. They don't like it. But since we were kind of owning the project and we had the funding, so we were quite tough. So we said, okay, you have a choice. If you want to be in this project, you have to have this system. Otherwise, you are out. You can choose. And of course, everybody chose to be, they say, these stupid Swedes now, but we want a new house. But then afterwards, they appreciated this and started to copy this solution now. And then I learned a lesson, because when I was a student, we always learned how you always have to listen to the user. You should always do like they want now. But I think as a professional, you also have some kind of responsibility. So there may be situations when you actually know more than a layman, and then you have to, how can I say, defend that argument or so.
Right. All right. Maybe a last one will be on gender, because you mentioned that gender sensibility in projects should be also incorporated. Maybe I would like to end with that one.
Well, from all the places I have been, starting in Tunisia, Costa Rica, Tanzania, Philippines, women are often the most active in housing improvement and housing building now. But I've also seen that it gives them better status. So because they can decide things now. And I think in Costa Rica, that has been very conscious. So I think this has an impact. I have a nice memory from Tunisia, where one of the poorest families, they built their house, you remember, in this rural setting, and they were poor, they were landless, they only had the land where their house was, and the husband was maybe 20 years older than his wife. And I remember when we approached the family, she wanted to have a new house, but he was not interested. He said it's just a lot of work and so, and they had 6 children. So she was the one, together with the children, building the house. It took them a year, digging foundation and everything. And then when they finished the house and it's nice white painted, it was very different from the mud house they had before. She wanted to have a bed, a regular bed of metal, not to sleep on the floor any longer. And she wanted to have a TV also, even though they had no electricity, but she knew that you could operate the TV on a car battery. Remember, this was 1980, I think. So she told to her husband, Mohammed, because the only income they had was when he was walking in this village to read the Quran for people, and they would give him some money. And she told him, Mohammed, now you go to Tunis, the capital, and you read the Quran for people there because they have more money. And then you buy us a new bed and a TV, and you don't come back before you have that. And that was the first family in that area that had a metal bed and a TV now. And she would never have done that without this project.
Empowerment. Great. Thank you very much, Yoni. Mark, maybe if you want to close, I just want to say thank you for your patience. We know it's late, maybe cold. You're in the basement probably.
No, I have heating now.
All right, good. So, Mark, go ahead.
No, thanks a lot, Johnny. Very interesting, your lecture. And I hope I have in further occasions, I have you like a guest.
Yeah.
See you. I hope I see you in person in October in Lund.
Yeah, we are very, very welcome now. And we will, of course, go around and look at Sigurd Livrand's building. I know you like that now.
Okay, thanks a lot. Have a good night. Sleep tight.
Thank you, and thank you for the invitation. I hope it was clear and so. Yeah.
Okay, best regards, Johnny. Thank you very much for your kindness. Bye-bye.
Yes, bye-bye. And
Take
thank you
care.
everybody for the question. Gracias a todos por las preguntas, por conectarse. Y ya saben, está abierta la beca, entonces pues vamos a tratar de tener entrevistas en abril para ver cuáles son los dos estudiantes o las dos estudiantes o él y la estudiante que van a estar en Suecia en agosto. August. And we will be welcoming 2 students from Sweden, hopefully as well. So we will see how the process is going over there. So very invited and welcome everyone. So see you.
See you. Muchas
Bye.
gracias.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.